Okay, so I wanted to take you through some of the controls on a digital SLR. So if we look at the front first, you can see I have a little UV filter. UV filter just basically filters out some UV, but really what I have it on there for is to protect the lens. So if I say I scratch something here, right, I get, instead of scratching my expensive lens, I'm just going to scratch this $20 UV filter. Some photographers will tell you don't put a $20 filter on a $300 lens, you're just degrading your image quality, but I'd rather screw this little filter up than my lens, so that's what I do. If we look around the front of the camera, you have a couple of buttons here. This one is a function button. It can be assigned to different things, this button right here. What it's set to now is to do bracketing, so you can use it for HDRs actually. So you can press this button. Let me show you on this. So I press that button and I roll the control wheel. You see it's going to make, it's setting it up to do multiple exposures. So that's what that's for right now, but you can change that. This button is a depth of field preview. That button right there. So if I press that, you see the lens. You can actually see the lens in there stopping down to its actual shooting aperture. So what that does is it might make the image darker, but it also shows you your depth of field. Down here on the left, we have our focus mode. You can see a C for continuous, an S for single, and M for manual. So continuous means it's going to continuously focus as you're pressing the shutter. S means it's going to focus once and try to focus and then beep, usually beeps. And then manual means you're on manual focus. This button here is to release the lens. So if I press that and then I turn, you see the lens comes off. And I don't want to leave it off very long because that's a good way to get dirt in your camera. So when you're changing the lens, you usually want to turn your camera upside down so you don't get dirt falling in the camera, and do it as fast as possible. Don't do it on the beach with sand blowing around, that kind of thing. Also on the front here I have a couple connectors. This is a PC connector, not to a PC computer, but a type of connector used for flashes. So it's kind of an old school connector. It's kind of, I think it's just electric. It's not even really digital or anything. But you will see that on to connect to flashes. Underneath this little door is the remote connector. So this will allow you to connect a remote cord, which allows you to not touch the camera while you shoot. Maybe if you're doing something very precise, macro photography or something, or product photography, you don't want to touch the camera. It's on a tripod. You can use that. Also lets you do long exposures using a trigger. I have a control wheel on the front, and that's about it on the front. If we go to the top, you'll see that there is a button here. That will allow me to spin this wheel, which is kind of my how many shots I'm going to take. So if I press this button and rotate, you see it says S, CL. S is single, CL is continuous shooting low, CH is continuous shooting high. So if I hold down the shutter, press the shutter, it's going to shoot once. If I press the shutter now, it's going to shoot multiple shots and then even faster. This one, LV, is live view, so if I press that and then I press the shutter, you'll see I get a live view shot there. That is so it, and then I press again and it actually takes the shot. So that is sort of like the mode you would see on a little point and shoot, where you're shooting through not using the viewfinder, but using the LCD. Next one over, if you can see that, there is a timer button, so you can shoot with a timer, and then mirror up means you're going to put the mirror up as you shoot. That would only be if you're doing very precise work. You don't want the mirror to vibrate the camera, so that's a special setting there. Usually you're going to be on S or one of these continuous modes. Here I have the quality button. So if I press that, and then I go over here and then roll the wheel, if you can get that on there, we go. If you can see that, kind of see it there. It says basic, normal, and let me get a little farther away. Basic, normal, and fine, and then it also says large or raw. So I can spin this and get different quality settings, and if I spin the other wheel, so I'm spinning this wheel to do that. If I spin this other wheel, the front one, it's going to say medium, small, medium, and large. So I can change the size here and the quality here. This camera is one of many that will let you shoot both at the same time. I can shoot a JPEG and a RAW file at the same time. You see it says fine and raw. So I'm shooting a fine JPEG and a RAW file at the same time, so that I can have both kinds of files at once. The next button here is white balance. So if I press that and then roll this wheel, you see I'm cycling through the different white balance settings, daylight, tungsten, even some manual presets, and then I can pick by Kelvin, degrees Kelvin as well if I want to. So that's white balance. The next one is ISO. If I roll the wheel now, I get ISO control, which is the speed, the sensitivity of my camera. And then if I go low, I get below some low settings. Goes up to, I think, 3200, and then it has some special high settings. Remember, the higher your ISO, the more noise you're going to get in your image. So that's what those three are: white balance, quality, and ISO. Over on the side, we have skipped a couple here. You have this button which opens a little pop-up flash, and then this button is flash compensation. So if I want to adjust the amount of compensation or amount of flash, if I press that, you see, and then I spin the wheel, front wheel, you see it says plus and minus. So that means I'm turning the flash down or up from where it thinks it should be. Also, if I spin the back wheel, I can change the flash mode. I don't know if it's very small, you can see that. It says this is red eye reduction, this is slow shutter with red eye, and there's slow, and there's rear curtain sync. So all these have kind of different effects. Slow shutter means, or slow flash means, it's going to try to do an ambient exposure with the available light, and it's also going to set the flash off at the same time. So you can consult your manual to read more about that. Up here on the top, I have the mode button. So if I press that and then spin the wheel, you see it goes from manual, M, aperture priority, shutter priority, program. If I'm in manual, the back wheel changes the shutter speed, and the front wheel here changes the aperture. You can see I also have a light meter on there. There's a light meter right there. And that, since I'm in manual, I'm setting everything. So if I go this way, you can see I'm under or overexposed. If I go that way, I am underexposed. The minus means under, and the plus means over. So I want it kind of in the middle usually. So there's kind of a manual setting. If I go to aperture priority, then I am now rolling the front wheel, and it's setting the aperture, which is the f-stop, and the camera is setting the shutter speed. So you see if I change the aperture, it changes the shutter speed. If I roll the back wheel, I'm going to go to shutter priority. Now I roll the back wheel, and it changes the shutter speed, and the camera adjusts the aperture. If I go to program, there's program, and I roll, it just picks its own f-stop and shutter speed, but you can still roll and choose a different amount. So I could go, if I want a wider aperture, I can go that way, or if I want a smaller aperture, I can go that way. So that is the mode button. This next button over here is exposure compensation. So if I click on that, if I'm in like a program, not a manual, but all the other modes, if I press that, you see I can roll the wheel and go negative or positive. So if I go positive, it's going to overexpose from what the camera thinks it should do. And if I go negative, it's going to underexpose from what the camera thinks it should do. So you're telling the camera you're wrong. I'm going to adjust from there. Some people will purposely do a little underexposure because it might get a little better color saturation that way. But that's kind of a personal preference. So that's that button. On the back here, we have a play button, which plays our images, and we have our trash button, which we can throw them away with. Right here, we have the metering pattern. So we have spot metering, which is going to take the center part of the image to meter from. We have this one up here, which is center weighted, and then the one in the middle is the average, the matrix, is where the camera's going to try to figure out the proper exposure. But if I want to pick a small spot, I would pick spot. If I want to kind of concentrate on the center, I would use center weighted. And then this is matrix. I can also press this button to lock my exposure and my focus. If I focus on something and I want to compose, I want to focus and then move my shot. And I don't want the camera to change the exposure or the focus, I can press that button. So that's a common thing to do, is kind of put your subject in the middle, press your shutter halfway, and then recompose. And you'll have to check your manual about how that works on different settings. That will also depend on your focus mode that we looked at over here. The next button is autofocus on. See if I can get that to show. There we go. What this will do is focus the camera even though you're not shooting a picture. So it just kind of shows you if you're going to focus or not, or you can use it to focus without pressing the shutter. And then there's our control, what we talked about. Down here I have focus pattern. So if I press that, let's see if I go to live mode, you'll see that. So now I can see if I'm on this mode, I can move this little focus point. See that little red dot, and I can use my rocker wheel here to move around. And that's going to say I'm going to focus only on that spot, whatever's in the red spot there. If I go to this middle one, it's going to look around and possibly track whatever it focuses on. And this is a little hard to see with the live view. So it's kind of more focus points. This is kind of one point. This is a little bit of a dynamic focusing. And then this one is the, oops, I was on the middle one here. Now I'm on sort of matrix focus, where it's going to look all around the image and try to find things to focus on. That's why you don't see a red dot anymore, because I'm not picking it. The camera's picking it. So if you want to pick it, you got to use one of these two on this camera anyway. So that's that. And then this is my rocker wheel, where I can move around that focus point. See how I'm moving that around? This is also used to navigate through your photos when you're playing back. So if I'm in playback mode, I have to get out of live view here. Playback mode, then I can cycle through my images with that. Also, when I'm in the shooting mode, if I want to lock that, so if I say I want to put my my focus point right there, if I want to lock that, I can slide to lock, and now I can't accidentally move it. Okay, over here on the left, I have a menu button, which we'll probably look at later. That'll go through all the menus on the camera. Let me get out of that mode, go through. There's all the menus in the camera, so we may look at that a different way in a different video. This one is a lock button, so if I'm playing back, I can lock an image, and so I can't accidentally delete it. This one is a zoom, so if I press that, I can zoom in and move around using my rocker switch. Move around through those images. Or if I zoom out, I can zoom out. That way I can also zoom smaller and then go up and down like you can on a point and shoot as well, so you can get through the images faster. So I'm zooming in, back in there. And this is okay. This is for menus. I'm going to say yes, I want to accept that choice. And there's lots and lots of menu items, so we won't look at that here. But that's basically the external controls. The important ones are the mode, which is right here where you choose your exposure mode. Program, shutter, aperture, or manual on this camera. Exposure compensation, which is here. I can make the image brighter or darker, which you'll have even on a very cheap camera or an inexpensive camera. Quality, which is right here, where I adjust the size of the image and the compression. So remember we said that you should probably always don't use basic on this camera. It's called basic unless you really have to. I would always leave it on fine. And then size, you can make your own judgment on that, whether what do you think you're going to do with the image. Remember, a larger image you can crop easier. And then raw, if you want some raw files too that you can edit, have more ability to edit with. It's a little hard to see there. And then ISO, remember you want to be low on the ISO if you can. If you're in a situation where you have enough light, you want this number to be low. And then on white balance, Again, you can use preset if you want, or leave it on auto. You'll usually be okay. It won't matter on RAW, remember, because you can always change it after. And there's also a manual way to set a white balance. This is pre, and the way that works is I would hold down I would shoot an image using that setting. See if it works. Yeah, there we go. So I just held down the white balance button until it started to blink, and then I shoot a picture of something white. It wasn't white what I shot, but I would shoot something white or gray, and then it would set my white balance so that that was the lighting condition. So if you're in a specific situation like a studio or a flash set, a setting where you're using strobes, and you want to make sure that your white balance is set correctly, you might use that pre-setting. And that's why it was flashing good, because it got a good reading, even though it's probably not right. So you can see now if I shoot a picture, well, you can't really see it, but you're telling the camera what is white under these lighting conditions. So that's what that white balance setting is for. And I think that's it for the SLR controls.